Hi everyone, and welcome to the Stitch and Chris podcast. This is episode 2, and my name is Chris. I'm a Texas-based knitter and crocheter, and my obsessions include wool, wine, and whiskey. So welcome. If this is your first time joining into the podcast, you don't have that much to catch up on. There's only one episode, and really, it's just like any other yarn-inspired podcast. However, what the difference is that I can both knit and crochet, and we're going to be talking about both here. Most of the podcasts on YouTube are either one or the other, and I'd like to actually meld those together, and I find that it's not that often that we see that. And so, also, it's a peace of mind for me to switch off between one or the other so that my hands can take a break and do other things and challenge myself in other ways. But that's only if you were not here for episode 1. For those of you who are returning, thank you very much. The support for the podcast has actually been really well received. I got some really great feedback of what I can do to improve and actually how to make them a little bit more interesting. But then again, it's just me talking to a camera and you're along for the ride. That being said, what are we actually getting into? For those of you that are new, the flow of the podcast is going to be finished objects, works in progress, upcoming things that I'm thinking of making, and then we like to end on something called a learning curve, where I take a past project, knit or crochet, and I talk about the trials and tribulations or the things I liked about it. And this one's actually a very good one, and I'm pretty excited to share that with you, but that's for the very end, so stay tuned for all of that. So, that being said, the first of the finished objects, we have 2 today to discuss. The first is actually this gorgeous Afghan behind me. It is the Bradley Afghan by TL Yarn Crafts. Now, I finished this in mid-January, and you must be asking yourself, and most of you probably aren't, but why would I be talking about this if it's now going into March? Well, the reason is because this is actually going to be a gift for my friend's wedding this coming weekend. And so I'm filming beforehand so I can talk about this because I thought it was something worth talking about. It's a gorgeous Afghan, and really I want you all to know how easy it is to also make. So Bradley Afghan by Tony Lipsy. It's made in Hue and Me colors Juniper, Macchiato, and Whisper. And it's for my friends Katie and Nash. What I asked, everyone knows when you invite me to a wedding, you'll be getting a blanket from me. And so when I asked Katie, like, what are your color palettes that you're looking for here? And she's like, oh, we really like green. And I was like, okay, perfect. Let me go make that up for you. They just bought a house, so I can imagine where this is going to go. If it's in a guest bedroom, if it's in the living room, don't care. Just don't let your new puppy rip it up. That's all I ask. But the pattern itself is pretty straightforward and pretty simple. Where it's the utilization of the linen stitch in color block chevrons. And so essentially you're doing single crochet using like a 10 millimeter hook. I believe that's a P. I used a P size for that. So you're doing single crochet to make the chevron, the triangle shape, and you are increasing at the top, doing a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet, and then chain 1 to then do the linen stitch down. And eventually, where you see right here, it'll keep growing horizontally, and then you'll start doing a single crochet together to stop, and it can grow vertically. You'll continue to make a giant like arrow shaped blanket, and then at the very, very end, what you're going to do is that to make the blanket be a rectangle, you'll break your yarn and continue just doing one corner and then join another to do the other corner. And essentially, as mindless as it is for a linen stitch, which I love a linen stitch, I love the color blocking of this. Like I did this one in a week and a half just because it was my last of my gift crafting to do, and I'm extremely jealous of it. When I was blocking it and stretched it all out and stuff, I was like, dang, the colors are amazing. It's very like modern, but also muted and everything, and it's cozy and cuddly, and Tony's very good at making those, partially because she is a taller woman. And so that's what I like about this pattern, is that it's a blanket that can cover people. And Katie and Nash are taller people anyway. I believe Katie's like 5'9". Like, I know that is actually great for like a couch or a bed or wherever you choose to put it. And the reason why we're recording this now is because their wedding is going, like, by the time that this episode drops, it will be past the wedding. So that's why I wanted to talk about it, because it's also just a really lovely piece. I want to make it again, but also I have another project that I'm going to talk about in the upcoming projects that is not this, but it's still, it goes in the realm of all of it. And we'll get to that. So once again, Bradley Afghan by TL Yarn Crafts. Highly recommend the pattern. Incredibly easy, and it looks so good on any surface, really. So the second finished object that we're going to discuss is what I was discussing as my last work in progress from episode 1. And that is the Campus Cardigan by Two of Wands. Now, for those of you who recall, it is a stockinette cardigan with no buttons, but has 2 front pockets. And one of the big things I was considering, when last we talked, I was working on the first sleeve. And it took me a while to get off Sleeve Island. For those of you who don't know, Sleeve Island is when, like, basically I worked up the back and you work up the front left panels, and like you're working on the sleeves. It's your last thing to do. But because it's your last thing, you're just like, oh, it takes a little bit longer. And I definitely lost the inspiration to continue on with the sweater a little bit after filming, just because I was so burnt out from just gift crafting for like 3 months straight. And since this was for me specifically, it was pretty difficult to like get back into that. I finished it, I'd say like 3 or 4 days ago, finally seamed it up and then cast on everything. But we're going to talk about this. So here's the sweater. It's in the color Marine in Hue and Me, and there's a lot to discuss about this sweater. So if you recall from the last episode, I have had problems with sizings of sweaters just because this is my 3rd sweater ever that I've made. Now here's the thing, is that this is the extra small. I'm 5'8", so like, okay. And a man, keep that in mind. So look at these bingo wings that this has given me. And I wanted to avoid that. I didn't realize that until after seaming everything up, that it would be more spacious with the positive ease. For those of you who do not know what that is, positive ease is when, from what I know, please correct me if I'm wrong, positive ease is when you actually have like enough room in a project to like move around in. So it's positive ease is all of this extra space. Negative ease is like, say you have a beanie that like your head stretches, and my head is rather large, so it would stretch. But the thing is that this is an extra small. It's pretty bulky on me. I'm not going to get up and show you, but like it's larger than I would have thought. And I mean, I'm already sitting down and you can just see that like it's pretty large. And this is after blocking, because it's a stockinette sweater, you have to block it to unfurl everything. And I wonder if it's just because, and I got gauge for my swatches. So that's why I was like, I don't know what I can do differently except knit in a smaller size. We'll get into that in the next work in progress. But the reason why the sleeves caught me so off guard, like, was because I had already made a knit sweater from Two of Wands called the Cliffside Cardigan. And that one fit me a lot better. It fit like a glove. Like the sleeves fit so much better. And I was shocked. And I had to go back to look at the stock photos. And Alexi is wearing the size small in the stock photos. So because of that, that's why I did the extra small, because I wanted to size up where I'm actually going. But in most of the stock photos, she has the sleeves pulled up, so they're more puffy. And like, sure, that's cute, but I can't wear this outside. I just personally like my sweaters to fit me more formally. And I want them to just accentuate my shape instead of me being bulky. And like, this is fine. I wore this the other day when it was cold in the city, and like I was like, okay, cool, like I can wear this inside. But I don't know if I'm confident enough to wear it outside just yet. Maybe if it's like really, really cold. But like, it's beginning to warm up here, so I don't really think that it's gonna do much. I don't know, like, I'm sad and disappointed, but I know I learned a lot from it. And I'm interested to see when I throw this in the wash and like dry it and stuff, because you can do that with Hue and Me, how much it's actually going to shrink, because this is just all blocked. But that's kind of one thing I saw in the comparison for sizes. But I'm going to use that to my advantage in the next sweater that I crochet, which is, we'll get into that. The other thing I learned is that compared to the first stitch, right here, you can see this is all whip stitch, and whip stitch is when it's one of the faster stitches. You just basically go around and around and like tighten it up. And I didn't want that to actually show for the rest of the sweater, and I wanted to try it out. So I did mattress stitch, which is where you're basically going into your two finished pattern pieces, and you're taking the yarn and going back and forth one after another in a like you have to like go under the bar of a certain knit stitch or whatever. And essentially it takes the two pieces and seams them together in an invisible seam in the right side work. So I did it all the way coming up. See, but that's where I weaved in an end, so that's nothing. So the seam is right here. You can't really tell, and then I used it to seam up to the sleeve, because that's how you're supposed to do it in the pattern. What mattress stitch does is that it makes this kind of seam right here. So again, it's invisible, and there you go. The other thing I did learn to do in this sweater was the tubular bind off, which I don't know if I like it or not, because I don't really like it when it's like Kitchener stitch. I don't know if I like that, because I don't like it when you have to do bind offs or stitches where you have to take a sewing needle to like finish a stitch on the needle kind of thing. Like you have your live stitches and then you take a sewing needle and you go in and like, okay, you knit normally and then you purl with the needle. And it's really annoying in my opinion. Now I did the tubular bind off for the end of the sleeves here, and it's supposed to be good for ribbing because it's supposed to make your ribbing like go into nothing. And I did it for the pockets. Now, the pockets were the first time I attempted this, so I think that's why they're a little bit baggy, because in the video it was like, oh, don't do it too tightly. I would do it tightly, just because they're a little meh. Anyway, but that's probably just me. For the collar, you're also supposed to do it for the amount of stitches you picked up. It said bind off in either rib or tubular bind off. Well, I'm not about to bind off tubular bind off in 169 stitches, because that just sounds like a nightmare. So what I did is that I did Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, however, which gives it this really nice even bind off right here. But the thing is that with Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, you're supposed to do a knit stitch, and then there's a different way for a purls to bind off with purls. And essentially with the bind off, to make it stretchier, is that you're doing a yarn over or a reverse yarn over to give you that extra yarn to give that extra stretch. And so I just did them all in knits, and honestly, it looks super, super uniform, and I like that. And in comparison to the Cliffside cardigan, I actually cast on the exact amount of stitches that it said, where like in the Cliffside one, you could see holes where I couldn't cast on enough. Well, here, like, that's not a problem. And so I was actually pretty impressed by myself where we got the collar down for picking up stitches. So go me. But yeah, Cliffside cardigan, learned a lot with the sizing. And I think next time it's just going to force myself to really, A, maybe read a pattern better, but B, also like know when to like frog back. I just didn't do any of that. I thought it would just fit. I think I have to be more self-conscious about my certain proportions going into patterns that I want to do. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do for my next one. That brings us to works in progress. In the middle of me, and I spoke about both of these in the last episode, in the middle of me waiting for the pieces of the campus cardigan to dry from blocking, I actually cast on my first project in complete DPNs. Now, I've worked with DPNs before, but I've never worked in fingering weight before. And I've also never worked in this tiny of DPNs before. And these DPNs are pretty tiny. They're size 2 needles, and they're the Pioneer gloves by Kelly McClure. I've already talked about them. But it really was an eye-opener for me to go from bulky weight yarn to fingering weight yarn. And my hands aren't dexterous enough. They have to get used to it to work with all 4 needles at once. I mean, it's just a luck of the draw. I've used DPNs before to like shape the crowns of hats and stuff, and it's not hard. I've also worked with 5 needles at once. This is just 4. But like for me to like hold it specifically in the round, and then it being that tiny, and then to go into like the individual stitches, like it's not as fast as I normally would like to. But I like the pattern that it's working up in. So I can't like knit that fast, or I have to just get used to a different way of holding the yarn. So we'll see how fast this comes into play. I'm glad that it's tiny enough that I can just grab and go. So like for those of you who knit socks, more power to you. I cannot, like, I haven't attempted yet. I don't know, after this maybe I just have to get used to it more, but like these gloves, I know that they'll be nice when they're all worked up and stuff, but I don't know. I'll keep you posted. But so far, very nice stuff. Very interesting. And again, I like the grab and go aspect if I can just bring these anywhere and work on it then. And it's really tiny. So there you go. We have a lot to talk about in this certain one. So as I said, for that campus cardigan, learned a lot in sizing with the specific designer. Now, that going into it, we're changing to crochet. So of course things are going to get lost in translation. We're changing in the different construction of this cardigan. So this one is called the Nantucket ribbed cardigan. And it's by Two of Wands. I spoke about it as well. And I already had the yarn. It's 100% superwash merino, very soft, awesome. I made 2 swatches yesterday because I was like, let me get this together. Here's swatch number 1. Oh, and these swatches are blocked, by the way. It was 16 stitches by 14 rows, and that's supposed to give you your 4 inch by 4 inch square. And after blocking, I believe this is 4.5 inches or 5, close to, but it's supposed to, the stitch pattern is supposed to be a yarn over, insert in back loop, slip stitch, which essentially looks like a bigger, it mimics a half double crochet, but it's different. You don't make an extra yarn over in that to make the full half double crochet. But that being said, it's supposed to make this like ribbed pattern right here. And as you can already see with my green background, like there's a lot of holes in there, and that's how much it grew. And this was using the recommended size hook of a J hook. And because of the campus cardigan, I was like, how can I combat this? I might go down a hook size, really. And where that came into play was that here's a Furls hook. These are very extremely beautiful hooks from Furls Crochet. And I got one of their hooks in amethyst. This is a recent drop. It's like purple. You can't really see it that well. Influencer handshake right here. It's purple and it's a size I. So originally when I was trying to buy one of these hooks, I was trying to get the size L or the size M. But they were already sold out of L, and the M one, it was in my cart, and I was trying to check out, and it was already, an error kept occurring because it had already sold out. And the next available size that I was like, I wanted was an I, because K and J were already sold out. The problem is that I don't use size I that often, and I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. Like, I have a size K already in the emerald color, but I needed a J, but I was like, I don't really know. And so I bought this on a whim just to like have it, just to have something from that specific collection, because I want a different color Odyssey hook in the ones that I use. And I mainly use from like size H for amigurumi up. So it's a size I. And so yesterday I thought, well, if I'm going down a hook size from a J, why don't I just use a size I instead? So I swatched it in a size I, and this pattern, following the gauge swatch, was 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches, and then after blocking, it's 4 inches. So honestly, yes, the size is smaller, and I think I can achieve a more desirable shape and size with this type of cardigan with a smaller hook. I think I can. I might have to do a little bit more modifications on the sleeves, but I think with this kind of hook, we can make it work. Really, the pattern worked up is beautiful. And the difference between I finally read the pattern this time, because originally when I was trying to make the chains, I was like, how is the rib pattern going to work? Because the first cardigan I made from her is horizontal rib like this. But in order to make the rib look like a knit stitch, it has to go vertical. So I think you work the left side of the panels first, and you're working across this way to shape everything. So it'll be interesting to see. It's funny, I had to take a break from all of it because my eyes were just like, I was like, I can't work on the Pioneer gloves. I can't work on this cardigan because it's smaller yarn, and like my eyes were already pretty strained. And so I was like, okay, let me do some escapism right here and play some video games. Currently playing Hogwarts Legacy. It's great, and it does the job to like escape into a different world scenario. So like that takes my mind off of it. Yeah, the Nantucket ribbed cardigan, we're using it in a size I, and I'm interested to see how much it will actually change, and I really don't think I'm going to mind it that much. And even if it's a little baggy, like, at least I know I tried with a smaller size, whereas if it's just too large, I just can't wear these out. Like, I'm not a bulky... The only thing I like wearing that's, like, bulky out are, like, really big coats or, like, maybe a sweatshirt. But we'll get into that as to what could actually be it. But I'll keep you posted on how far we get into the Nantucket ribbed cardigan. We'll see if I finish it in the month. I doubt it, but let's keep going, shall we? Oh, and then there's one thing I also want. So the Furls Odyssey hooks are great, but in the last podcast, I also talked about having a problem with the Streamline resin hook. It wasn't a problem. There was just a slight squeak when I was working on 80% acrylic, 20% wool. And, you know, I bought that for my temperature blanket, and I didn't really mind it that much. However, I also had ordered this hook from Furls, and it's the Streamline limited edition Cruella. And it's a wood hook. Let's do influencer handshake in size L, and it's super smooth, extremely light, still ergonomic with that base. And I've been working with it for the past 2 weeks with my temperature blanket, and this is amazing. It's like butter. Like, I can't get enough of this. The only issue I'm seeing is that I might have to sand down one little edge, like right here, because how I hold it, that's exactly where my pinky goes. And I noticed it yesterday when I was finishing up a couple last rows, that my pinky started rubbing against something rough. And I was like, oh, is that 5 o'clock shadow? No, and I can see it. I'm not going to show the camera, but there's like a little bit where it's a little bit rough. And I'm all like, I might have to sand that down. I shouldn't have to do that. But I will say, overall, a vast improvement from the resin hook over the wood. So overall, like that a lot. Glad it happened. Glad I got that problem fixed. But yeah, that's just my personal preferences with wood versus resin. I'm a metal person all the way, but again, hard to get. There's like an Odyssey shortage, says Furls, and so they're trying to sort everything out. I've been trying to get more Odyssey ones, but they're just not available. Or if they are, they're in like the larger sizes, which I don't care for because I already have a large size hook in the one I need. So that doesn't matter. So now we're going to go into the upcoming projects, and then we'll finish it off with the learning curve. Hi, baby. How you doing? Oh, you look so good. So the upcoming projects that I actually just received the yarn for are 2 things. So like I said, I really wanted to work on another blanket pattern from TL Yarn Crafts, and so I finally got my hands on the yarn for the Amber Afghan. What it is that it's an worked on the bias Tunisian crochet Afghan, and it uses the colors from Hue and Me, and it's basically, you'll ombre the colors through, and it's really beautiful. Tony picked her colors, and she's a warm colored person. She did the greens, and then it cut off into the bright oranges and the pinks and stuff like that. I'm not that person, but what I'm doing is that I'm going to do the green palette, cut it off as the color from for Crush, which is like a purple, and then that's going to hue into an ombre of like browns and grays and stuff. So I'm very excited for that. Also excited to finally break in my Tunisian crochet interchangeable set. I've had it for a while, but I used it for one pattern, but I stopped that pattern halfway through because the yarn just was not working with me. And I was like, no, thank you. So I was like, okay, let's actually do this. Also, there's tassels on the end of the whole blanket, but I don't think that I'm going to need to weave in the ends for it, which is everything I want to know. The fact that I don't have to do that with that many colors, bring it on. Let's go. Oh yeah. That was Geralt. The other thing that I got yarn for was the New Hue sweater by North Knits. It's a stockinette color blocked bottom up pullover. And you just have to pick up the stitches on the sleeves, I believe, and then just knit out. So again, learned a lot from the campus cardigan. Let's see how the new one goes in. Oh, Oh, there he is. Good cameo. I think seeing how going down a size is going to help might actually improve how I'm going to be doing the new hue sweater. And plus, since it's color blocking, it's not as boring as going into it for the campus cardigan, which is just solid. So I think it'll keep me a little bit more interested going into it, especially with the repetitive stockinette style. Okay, and then now the last thing that brings us to is the learning curve. And this one I have a very heated opinion about this one. This is the project that got me back into crochet about 2 years ago in 2021. And it is the Rosebridge plaid blanket scarf by Two of Wands. And I chose cooler colors. In the original, she has the grays with the pinks. I chose the blue. And it's gorgeous. It is one of my favorite scarves. It is so warm. The yarn is retweed, so it's recycled tweed. It's like 40% wool. There's acrylic in it. I believe there's also polyester or cotton. It has a cotton feel to it. It keeps me warm. It's such a bold statement scarf, and it got me on the trend of blanket scarves. That being said, I will never make this type of scarf ever again. But but also on that being said, I've made this scarf 2 other times. The second was a birthday gift for one of my friends, where instead of the long blanket style, I halved it. I cut it down the middle. I didn't cut it, but I only did the amount of stitches down the middle and did it slimmer for a guy. And even then, and then I did the knit version, which is the Waterbury plaid blanket scarf. I think that's what it's called. Hated that one because I don't think that one's long enough, in my opinion. I think I might have messed up in the pattern, or the pattern was just not written long enough. I don't want to check because I don't want to cause myself anxiety. But what I don't like about this pattern, but what's the best part to make it the pattern, is the plaid. I'm such a big fan of plaid, but the problem is that in order to achieve the plaid, what it is that for the crochet version, you double crochet throughout your pattern and do a stripe of white, obviously gray, blue, light blue, whatever. You double crochet everything. And then you cut a bajillion strands of the different types of yarn. And the pattern will tell you what colors to cut in what end. And this is another thing that I hated about it. I accidentally cut my strands too short the first time and just wasted a bunch of yarn in one of the colors. Luckily, I accidentally ordered too much yarn, so I had more to pull from, but you have to cut out, I want to say it was 50 inches per strand of all of this. So I completely forgot about that. That really bugged me. And so then what you do is that you put it in a darning needle and you weave in individually in and out of the stitches. Now there's a video you can follow from the website to actually work on this. But halfway through I got really bored and it got really redundant and mundane. And I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, but I don't like it when designers are oh, it's a really meditative process to just do that. That's great. Good for you. That is synonymous in this sense with not very interesting. And here's the thing. The Bradley Afghan was meditative because yes, it's single crochet, but I had fun with the color blocking. This one, I'm not I think I just don't like weaving because that's where I got bored. And if you like weaving in your ends, if you like weaving any of that, good for you. But there's so many of these strands to weave in. And then once you weave them all in, then you have to use another technique to rope tie them together. Because as you see, this one's white and blue, so you can get that effect. And it's I had to put this over a chair and go do all of that. This took a long time to make. And so that's why, I think that's the other thing about it, where I wanted the finished product more than the process. And I found that by the end, it just was not as enjoyable as I thought. And I thought maybe if I tried again in a different sense and okay, the answer was no. If I were to ever do this again, I would make it longer. I would make the original scarf longer because lose a lot of the fabric length when you weave in. It tightens up, it shrinks the fabric. And so it's not long enough for me to like do 2 like turns and stuff. I can only just throw it over one shoulder. I can't do the European loop with it. I can barely wear it like this because it just goes out here. And yeah, the tassels are there, but like that's not really anything. I like wearing this with a giant, what I call while you were sleeping jackets. But yeah, overall, very interesting scarf. Again, beautiful. One of my favorites that I like to wear. I don't like making it. And good for you if you want to. There are a lot of, there are blankets that she's made using the plaid technique. I will not be making them. You could go make them and tell me all about it. But yeah, no, the thought of especially doing it on a blanket, I can't imagine how like that would shrink that much. So no, thank you. But again, it got me back in the craft. We're still in here. We're making a podcast about it. So it did it for a reason. And again, I mean, it's a great pattern. It's beautiful. That actually brings us to the end. That's it. That's all I have for episode 2, guys. Thanks for sticking around if you have. Thanks for clicking around if you have as well. If you want, you can like the video. You don't have to. You can subscribe. You don't have to. You can comment. You don't have to. I'm not asking for any of these things. But if you want to engage with me, by all means, I am here for that. I'm on Ravelry, but I'm not on there as like a social media thing, so don't add me on any of that, and I won't put that. But I'm on Instagram at stitchn.chris. It's a very beginner account, but I like having my own Instagram dedicated to knit and crochet, so I can get all my inspiration from everybody and follow who I really want to. But yeah, we don't have an ending headline, so until next time, we'll probably do this in the next month. But thank you, everybody, and have a good day, have a good week, have a good life. So thanks.